Welcome to Monk's Temple. Welcome to Monk's Temple. Before we begin, just take a moment to acknowledge where you are right now. Maybe you're lying in bed, the weight of the day finally releasing its hold on your shoulders. Maybe you're sitting in a quiet corner of your home, the only sound the gentle hum of a refrigerator or the distant bark of a dog. Maybe you're on a commute, the world rushing past your window while you steal this moment for yourself. Wherever you are, you've arrived here carrying something. A restlessness in your chest. A question that won't quite form into words. A hope that maybe, just maybe, things could feel a little lighter. You're not here for entertainment. You're here because something in you recognizes that the way you've been living isn't quite working. The patterns you repeat, the arguments that play out in your head long after they're over, the sense that you're running on a treadmill that never stops. These aren't character flaws. They're symptoms. And what the man we call the Buddha discovered 25 centuries ago is that these symptoms have specific causes. Not mystical causes. Not divine punishment. Just causes and effects operating in your own mind, as predictable as gravity. He spent 6 years learning to see these causes clearly. Not believing in them, not hoping they were true, but seeing them directly, the way you see that a flame is hot by putting your hand near it. What he found were patterns. 10 specific ways the mind creates its own suffering. And more importantly, he found that when you remove the causes, the suffering stops. Not eventually. Not in some afterlife. Right now. In this life. In this body. In this moment you're breathing through. Tonight, we're going to explore these 10 patterns together. But we're not going to do it the way you might expect. We're not going to follow a linear path from beginner to master because transformation doesn't work that way. It's more like weaving a cloth. Each thread crosses the others at different points, each one supporting and being supported by the rest. By the time we're finished, you'll have a fabric you can wrap around yourself when the cold winds blow. Find a comfortable position. Let your body settle into the surface beneath you. If you're listening while walking or driving, just notice the contact of your feet with the ground, your hands with the steering wheel. No need to close your eyes if that doesn't feel safe. Just let your awareness soften a little at the edges. There's nothing you need to do right now except receive. In a small village nestled between rice paddies and a slow-moving river, there lived a gardener named Tissa. Tissa loved his garden more than anything. He loved the way the morning light fell on the dew-covered leaves. He loved the smell of turned earth after rain. He loved watching things grow from tiny seeds into plants that could feed a family. But Tissa had one problem. He couldn't stop touching the seeds. Every morning, he would plant a few seeds in the rich soil. Then, an hour later, he would dig them up to see if they had sprouted. Finding nothing, he would replant them, pressing them deeper into the ground. An hour after that, he would dig them up again. By evening, the seeds were bruised, cracked, and lifeless. Nothing grew in Tissa's garden except weeds. His neighbors noticed. They saw him working from dawn until dusk, his hands never still, his brow always sweating. Tissa is the hardest worker in the village, they said. If anyone deserves a bountiful garden, it's him. But the garden remained bare. One evening, an old monk passed through the village and stopped to rest near Tissa's plot. He watched as Tissa dug up seeds, replanted them, smoothed the soil, then dug them up again. After a while, the monk spoke. "What are you trying to grow, friend?" Tissa looked up, surprised. He hadn't noticed the monk sitting there. "Everything," he said. "Vegetables, herbs, flowers. But nothing grows. I work harder than anyone, and nothing grows." The monk pointed to a small mound of disturbed soil. "How many times have you planted those seeds today?" Tissa thought. "Maybe 10 times. Maybe more. I keep checking to see if they're doing anything." "And what do you find when you check?" "Nothing. They just sit there. It's like they're mocking me." The monk smiled gently. "You're trying to do the plant's work for it. Your job was to put the seed in good soil and give it water. The seed's job is to sprout when it's ready. By digging it up every hour, you're not helping. You're killing it before it can live." Tissa stared at the monk. Then he stared at his bare garden. For the first time, he saw what his hard work had actually produced. "Nothing. Try this," the monk said. "Tomorrow, plant your seeds once. Water them once. Then let them be. If you need to do something, tend to the weeds at the edge of the garden. But leave the seeds alone." Tissa was skeptical. Doing less seemed like giving up. But the garden was already dead, so what did he have to lose? The next day, he planted once, watered once, and spent the rest of his time pulling weeds at the edge of the property. His hands felt strange, empty. He kept wanting to check the seeds, but he forced himself to wait. A week later, tiny green shoots were pushing through the soil everywhere he'd planted. This story is about you. You're Tissa, and the garden is your life. The seeds are the things you're trying to grow. Peace. Fulfillment. Loving relationships. A sense of purpose. And you're digging them up constantly with your mind. You want to be happy, so you check obsessively to see if you're happy yet. You want to be peaceful, so you monitor your inner state like a hawk watching for mice. Every time you feel a flicker of discomfort, you dig up the seed, replant it somewhere else, try a different technique, a different teacher, a different philosophy. The soil is already rich. The conditions are already sufficient. The only thing missing is your willingness to let things grow at their own pace. Psychologically, what Tissa was doing is what we now call hypervigilance. The constant scanning for threats or progress that actually prevents either from being accurately perceived. Your nervous system was designed to notice danger so you could respond to it. But when you turn that same system inward, when you start scanning your own mind for signs of failure or inadequacy, you create a feedback loop that guarantees you'll find what you're looking for. You've done this. You've sat in meditation waiting for something profound to happen, and when nothing did, you concluded you were doing it wrong. You've tried to be more patient with your children, and the first time you snapped, you decided patience wasn't in your nature. You've attempted to change a habit, and when you slipped on day 3, you told yourself you had no willpower. Each time, you dug up the seed. Each time, you prevented the very growth you were trying to achieve. The Buddha called this the middle way. Not a compromise between extremes, but a recognition that some things happen on their own timetable. You can't force a seed to sprout by yelling at it. You can't force your mind to be peaceful by monitoring it for signs of unrest. You create the conditions, and then you wait. You water, you weed, but you don't dig. Think about a time when something good grew naturally in your life. Maybe it was a friendship that deepened over years without either of you forcing it. Maybe it was a skill you developed by practicing regularly without obsessing about progress. Maybe it was a period when you felt genuinely at peace, and you couldn't quite say how you got there. Those things grew because you stopped digging them up. The middle way applies to everything. Work, rest, effort, surrender. You've tried the extreme of frantic effort, checking your seeds every hour, and it left you exhausted with empty hands. You may have also tried the other extreme, abandoning the garden entirely, letting weeds take over because it was too painful to keep failing. Neither extreme works. What works is planting once, watering consistently, and trusting the process. Tonight, as you rest here, you're giving yourself permission to stop digging. You don't need to figure everything out. You don't need to solve every problem before morning. You just need to lie here and let the soil do its work. The seeds are already planted. They've always been planted. Your job now is to let them be. If this teaching resonates with you, if the image of the gardener and the soil speaks to something in your own experience, consider subscribing to Monk's Temple. Each week, we explore these ancient insights together, weaving them into the fabric of modern life. Just tap the subscribe button below. It's a small way of telling yourself that this path matters, that your growth matters. And it helps others find these teachings too. There was once a cartographer named Javaka who was famous throughout the kingdoms for the accuracy of his maps. Kings commissioned him to chart their lands. Merchants paid him handsomely for routes through mountain passes. Travelers relied on his work to reach destinations they'd never seen. Javaka took his work seriously. He measured every road with careful steps. He noted every stream, every village, every stand of trees. He interviewed locals about hidden dangers, seasonal changes, the best places to ford rivers. His maps were works of art and science combined, and his reputation was beyond reproach. One day, a young monk came to Javaka with a request. He was planning a pilgrimage to a remote shrine in the mountains, and he needed a map that would guide him safely. Javaka spread a large sheet of parchment on his table and began to draw. He marked the starting point, the road through the forest, the river that needed crossing, the steep ascent to the shrine. He added notes about where to find water, where the path became treacherous, where travelers sometimes got lost. When he finished, he handed the map to the monk with satisfaction. The monk studied it carefully, then looked up. "This is beautiful work," he said. "But I have one question. Is the path really this straight?" Javaka frowned. "I've measured it myself. It's as accurate as humanly possible." "That's not what I'm asking," the monk said. "I'm asking if walking the path feels like this line on the paper. Is it as simple as following this mark from here to there?" Javaka opened his mouth to answer, then closed it. He'd spent 40 years making maps, but he'd never actually walked any of the paths he charted. He stayed in his workshop, sending assistants to gather measurements while he compiled their reports into beautiful drawings. He knew the distances, the elevations, the locations of landmarks. But he didn't know how the path felt under weary feet. He didn't know the way the forest closed in until you couldn't see the sky, or the way your lungs burned in the thin mountain air, or the way doubt crept in when the trail disappeared and you had to find it again yourself. The monk smiled gently. "Your map is true as far as it goes," he said. "But the map is not the path. And the path is not the territory. I thank you for your work, but the walking I'll have to do myself." This is the difference between knowing about something and knowing it directly. You have maps for every aspect of your life. Maps of what happiness should look like, drawn from movies and social media and the carefully edited stories people tell. Maps of who you should be, based on parents' expectations and cultural messages and your own desperate hopes. Maps of what success means, what love means, what a good life means. These maps are not wrong exactly. They're just not the territory. The Buddha called this right view. Not the view you inherit or adopt, but the view that comes from seeing clearly what's actually present. He spent 6 years practicing with intensity, following the maps other teachers provided. He starved his body until his spine poked through his skin. He held his breath until his head pounded. He followed every instruction with perfect fidelity. And none of it brought him any closer to understanding. Why? Because he was studying the map instead of walking the path. Right view means distinguishing between your mental representation of something and the thing itself. You have a mental representation of yourself. You call it me. And you believe this representation is accurate. But watch it closely for even a few minutes. Notice how me changes depending on who you're with, what you're doing, how well you slept. Notice how me is sometimes confident, sometimes terrified, sometimes generous, sometimes petty. Which one is the real you? They're all real. They're just not permanent. They're not solid. They're not a thing you can hold on to. Right view means seeing that everything changes, including you. Not believing it intellectually, but seeing it directly. Look at your hand. Really look at it. The skin you're seeing right now is not the same skin that was there a month ago. Cells have died and been replaced. The pattern of veins has shifted microscopically. The very atoms that compose your hand are vibrating, moving, exchanging energy with the environment. You call it, my hand, as if it's a fixed possession, but it's actually a process, a river of matter and energy that only looks solid from a distance. This is not philosophy. This is biology. This is physics. This is direct observation. The suffering comes when you confuse the map for the territory. You have a map that says you should be happy in certain circumstances. When those circumstances arise and you're not happy, you conclude something's wrong with you. But maybe the map is wrong. Maybe happiness doesn't work the way the map shows. Maybe it's not a destination you reach when conditions are perfect, but a quality of attention you bring to conditions as they are. You have a map that says certain people should treat you in certain ways. When they don't, you feel hurt, betrayed, angry. But maybe the map is wrong. Maybe people are processes, not fixed characters in your story. Maybe their behavior today is shaped by 1,000 factors you can't see, having nothing to do with you. Maybe the expectation itself is what hurts, not the behavior. The monk who commissioned the map knew he had to walk the path himself. He respected Javaka's work, but he didn't confuse it with the actual journey. You can respect the maps you've been given. They contain useful information. But at some point, you have to put the map down and take a step. And then another. And then another. When you do, you'll discover things no map can show you. You'll discover that the path isn't straight, no matter what the drawing suggests. You'll discover that some sections are beautiful beyond description, while others are just muddy and unpleasant. You'll discover that you're stronger than you thought, and also more tired than you expected. You'll discover that the shrine at the end is not the point. The walking is the point. Right view is not about having the correct opinions. It's about seeing clearly that your opinions are not the same as reality. Your thoughts about a problem are not the problem itself. Your feelings about a person are not that person. Your judgments about yourself are not you. This is where freedom begins. When you stop fighting with your maps and start walking the actual ground. In a rocky valley surrounded by hills, there lived a young woman named Anula. She was known in her village for two things: her beautiful singing voice, and her terrible temper. When things went her way, Anula's songs could make anyone smile. When things didn't, her anger could empty a room. One afternoon, Anula went to the river to fetch water. She carried a large clay pot on her hip, walking the familiar path through the forest. But when she reached the riverbank, she found the water unusually low, muddy, barely enough to fill her pot. She had to wait, scooping slowly, as the water trickled in. By the time her pot was full, Anula was furious. She hoisted it onto her shoulder and started back toward the village, muttering about the unfairness of it all. The low water. The wasted time. The weight of the pot. Everything seemed designed to frustrate her. As she passed a particular outcropping of rock, she heard something. A voice. It seemed to be coming from the hillside, repeating her mutterings back to her. She stopped and listened. Unfairness of it all, the voice said. Who's there? Anula called out. Who's there? The voice replied. Show yourself, she demanded. Show yourself, came the answer. Now Anula was really angry. Someone was hiding in the rocks, mocking her. She shouted insults, and each one came back to her. She threatened violence, and the threats returned. Finally, in a blind rage, she hurled her heavy water pot at the rocks where the voice seemed to originate. The pot shattered. Water poured onto the dry ground and disappeared. And in the silence that followed, Anula heard only the trickle of what was left, soaking uselessly into the dust. She sat down and wept. Her water was gone. Her pot was destroyed. And she still had to explain to her family why she returned empty-handed. An old woman who lived nearby had heard the commotion and came to investigate. She found Anula crying among the shards of clay. Child, she said gently, what happened? Anula told her about the voice, the mocking, the insults, the pot thrown in rage. The old woman listened, then nodded slowly. I know that voice, she said. I've heard it all my life. It lives in those rocks. And it always says exactly what you say to it. Anula looked up, confused. What do you mean? The rocks echo, the old woman said. They don't create words. They only return what they receive. You weren't hearing someone mocking you. You were hearing yourself. This story is about karma. Not the simplified version you've heard, where the universe keeps a ledger of good and bad deeds, rewarding and punishing accordingly. That's a children's story. Real karma is simpler and more immediate. Karma means action. Specifically, intentional action. And its results are not stored in some cosmic database. They're stored in you. In your patterns. In your tendencies. In the grooves your repeated actions carve into your consciousness. Anula shouted insults at the echo, and the echo returned insults. She threw her pot in rage, and the result was a broken pot and a long walk home with nothing to show for it. The echo didn't punish her. It just reflected what she gave it. The consequences of her anger weren't imposed from outside. They were the natural results of acting while angry. This is how karma works in your life, right now, today. Every time you react to frustration with anger, you strengthen the anger habit. You make it easier to be angry next time. You deepen the groove. Eventually, anger becomes automatic, your first response to any difficulty. And then you wonder why your relationships are strained, why people walk on eggshells around you, why you feel exhausted all the time. The echo didn't cause Anula's anger. Her anger caused the echo. And then she blamed the echo for her own suffering. Look at your life through this lens. The person who constantly feels criticized. Is the world really full of critics, or has that person developed a habit of hearing everything as criticism? The person who feels betrayed by everyone. Is everyone really betraying them, or has suspicion become so automatic that neutral actions are interpreted as hostile? These patterns are karma. Not punishment from above. Just the accumulated weight of your own past actions, shaping how you perceive and respond to the present. The good news is that karma works both ways. Just as you can deepen negative grooves through repetition, you can create new grooves through different choices. Anula could learn to approach the echo differently. Next time she passed those rocks, she could sing. And the echo would sing back. She could speak words of kindness, and the kindness would return. This is not magic. It's just how patterns work. Every time you choose patience instead of reactivity, you strengthen patience. Every time you choose to see the good in a situation instead of the threat, you strengthen that perception. Every time you respond to difficulty with curiosity instead of judgment, you make curiosity more available next time. The results of these choices accumulate. Not in a ledger somewhere, but in your nervous system, your thought patterns, your habitual responses. You are literally rebuilding your brain with every intentional action. This is karma. This is science. This is hope. The old woman helped Anula gather the pieces of her pot, but they couldn't be repaired. Some consequences are permanent. The water was gone. The pot was broken. Anula would have to face her family with empty hands. But she could also learn from this. She could carry this lesson forward. And the next time she heard an echo, she might pause before throwing something at it. You're standing in front of your own echoes right now. The patterns you've created through years of repetition are echoing back at you. Some of those echoes are painful. But you don't have to keep throwing pots at them. You can choose differently, starting with your next breath. In a bustling city, there lived a merchant named Pingla who had a peculiar habit. Whenever he saw something beautiful, something that made his heart lift even slightly, he would find a way to acquire it. A painting in a market. A rare flower in a garden. A song played by a street musician. If it pleased him, he wanted to own it. This worked well enough when the things he wanted could be bought. His house filled with paintings and sculptures and musical instruments he never learned to play. But soon, Pingla began wanting things that couldn't be owned. The way light fell through his window at dawn. The sound of children laughing in the street below. The feeling of contentment after a good meal. These things came and went, and each time they left, Pingla felt a small loss. He would try to recreate them, position himself in the same place at the same time, will the children to laugh again, eat the same food hoping for the same satisfaction. Sometimes it worked for a moment. Mostly it didn't. And each failure left him more frustrated, more convinced that happiness was something that kept slipping through his fingers. One evening, Pingla sat in his garden surrounded by things he owned. The sunset was spectacular, orange and pink spreading across the sky like a gift. Pingla watched it, and for a moment he felt that lifting in his heart. Then the thought came, I wish I could keep this. I wish sunsets came with a warranty. The moment he had this thought, the sunset lost its beauty. He was no longer watching it. He was trying to possess it. And possession and appreciation cannot happen at the same time. A neighbor, an old woman named Kisa, was tending her own modest garden next door. She saw Pingla's face fall as the colors faded. You look like you've lost something important, she said. Pingla sighed. I did. The sunset. I wanted to keep it, and now it's gone. Kisa laughed gently. You didn't lose it. It was never yours to keep. You were just allowed to witness it for a moment. That's all anyone gets. Pingla stared at her. What's the point of witnessing something if you can't hold on to it? What's the point of eating if you're just going to get hungry again? Kisa replied. What's the point of breathing if you have to keep doing it? The sunset wasn't for keeping. It was for seeing. You saw it. That was the whole point. This is the teaching on impermanence and attachment. Not that things are bad because they end, but that trying to hold on to what is inherently passing is the direct cause of suffering. Pingla thought he wanted beautiful things. What he actually wanted was the feeling those things produced in him. And because he couldn't distinguish between the external object and his internal response, he kept trying to possess the object, hoping the feeling would stay. This is what the Buddha meant by clinging. Not loving things, but grasping at them. Not appreciating beauty, but trying to own it. Not enjoying experiences, but trying to freeze them so they never end. You do this constantly. You have a wonderful meal and you want it to last forever. You have a perfect moment with someone you love and you feel sad before it's even over because you know it will end. You achieve something you've worked for and instead of feeling satisfied, you immediately start worrying about losing it or needing the next achievement to feel good again. This is like trying to catch a river in a bucket. The river isn't refusing to be caught. It's just being a river. The problem is the bucket. The Buddha didn't teach that life is suffering. He taught that clinging causes suffering. Remove the clinging and life is just life. Sometimes pleasant, sometimes unpleasant, always changing. The pleasant doesn't last, but neither does the unpleasant. The sunsets fade, but so do the sunburns. The laughter ends, but so does the crying. Everything passes. Everything. This is not pessimism. This is freedom. If you stop trying to freeze the river, you can stop being exhausted by the effort. You can sit on the bank and watch it flow. You can even get in and let it carry you for a while. But you stop trying to own it. Pingla had filled his house with things he thought would make him happy. But he was less happy than Kisa, who owned almost nothing and spent her evenings watching sunsets she never tried to keep. The difference wasn't in what they had. The difference was in what they grasped. Look at your own life. What are you trying to hold on to right now? A relationship that's already changing? A version of yourself that's already gone? A dream that may or may not come true? The effort of holding is exhausting. And it doesn't work. What you're holding will change or leave regardless of how tight your grip. What would it feel like to relax your hands? Just for a moment. To let things be what they are without requiring them to be what you want. The sunset is beautiful because it ends. The meal is satisfying because you were hungry. The laughter is precious because it's rare. The ending is part of what makes the experience valuable. This is not giving up. This is waking up. In a village known for its textiles, there lived a weaver named Sona and his daughter, Mira. Sona was famous for the complexity of his patterns, the way he could weave multiple colors and threads into designs that seemed to shift as you looked at them. Travelers came from distant towns just to buy his cloth. Mira watched her father work from the time she could walk. She learned to thread the loom, to wind the bobbins, to match colors. By the time she was 12, she could weave simple patterns on her own small loom. By 16, she was helping her father with his most complex commissions. But Mira had a problem. She couldn't finish anything. She would start a piece with enthusiasm, choosing colors carefully, setting up the loom with precision. She would weave for hours, watching the pattern emerge. And then, when the piece was almost complete, she would stop. She would look at what she'd made and see only the flaws. A thread slightly out of place. A color that didn't quite work. A pattern that seemed less beautiful than she'd imagined. She would cut the cloth from the loom and throw it away, starting something new. Her father watched this happen again and again. Pile after pile of almost finished cloth grew in the corner of their workshop. Mira started new projects constantly and finished almost none. Finally, Sona sat down with his daughter. "Show me your favorite piece," he said. Mira hesitated. She didn't have a favorite. None of them were good enough. But she rummaged through the piles and pulled out a piece she'd almost finished the previous week. It was a shawl in shades of blue and green, meant to evoke the feeling of deep water. Sona held it up and examined it carefully. "This is beautiful," he said. "Why did you stop?" Mira pointed to a spot near the edge. "See here. This thread should be darker. And here, the pattern shifts slightly. It's not perfect." Sona nodded. "It's not perfect. It's also not finished. Which matters more?" Mira thought. "I don't want to put my name on something that's flawed." "Your name isn't on it now," Sona said. "It's just a pile of thread. The flaws exist whether you finish it or not. But if you finish it, the beauty exists too. Right now, only the flaws exist because you won't let the beauty be seen. This is the lesson of completion. The willingness to let something be done, even if it's not perfect." Mira's mind was caught in what we now call all-or-nothing thinking. If it wasn't perfect, it was worthless. But in reality, most things are neither perfect nor worthless. They're just what they are. A shawl with a slightly off-color thread can still keep someone warm. A meal that isn't restaurant quality can still nourish. A conversation that wasn't perfectly articulate can still connect two human beings. The Buddha called this the middle way between perfectionism and carelessness. Not striving for flawless results, but not giving up either. Just doing the work as well as you can in this moment, then letting it be done. Myra's unfinished piles represented something deeper than perfectionism. They represented her fear of being judged. As long as the work wasn't finished, she could tell herself it would have been perfect if she just kept working. Finishing meant exposing it to the world, and the world might not approve. You do this with your life. You keep your dreams unfinished so they can't fail. You keep relationships at a distance so they can't hurt you. You keep your true self hidden so no one can reject it. The unfinished pile grows while you tell yourself you're still working on it. But the pile is not progress. It's avoidance dressed up as effort. Mira looked at her father with new eyes. What if people see the flaw? Then they'll see a flaw, Sona said. And they'll also see a beautiful shawl. Most people won't notice the flaw unless you point it out. And the ones who do notice, they're looking for flaws. Their opinion doesn't matter as much as your willingness to finish. Mira took the shawl back to her loom. She wove the final rows, tied off the threads, and held up the completed work. It wasn't perfect. The slightly off-color thread was still there. But it was finished. And finished was better than perfect. The next week, a traveler bought that shawl for his wife. He didn't notice the flaw. He only saw the beauty. And Mira learned that completion has its own perfection, separate from the one she'd been chasing. A man was walking through the forest when he was struck by an arrow. The arrow pierced his arm, and the pain was immediate and intense. He cried out and fell to the ground. As he lay there, bleeding and in agony, a second thought arose. Why me? Why did this happen to me? I'm a good person. I don't deserve this. This isn't fair. And as these thoughts spiraled, a second wave of pain washed over him. Not physical pain this time, but mental. Suffering about suffering. Pain about pain. This is the teaching of the two arrows. The first arrow is unavoidable. It's the physical pain of injury, the loss of someone you love, the disappointment of plans falling through, the natural difficulties of being alive in a body on a planet where things don't always go your way. The first arrow happens. You don't choose it. The second arrow is optional. It's the story you tell yourself about the first arrow. This shouldn't be happening. This isn't fair. Why me? If only I'd done something different. This proves something terrible about me or about life. The second arrow is self-inflicted. And it often causes more suffering than the first. The man with the arrow in his arm had no control over being shot. But he had some control over what happened next. He could focus on getting help, on removing the arrow, on healing. Or he could pour his energy into the story of unfairness, which wouldn't remove the arrow or speed his healing but would definitely increase his misery. You've experienced this. A criticism at work. That's the first arrow. It stings. Then you spend 3 days replaying it, imagining what you should have said, worrying about your reputation, concluding that your boss hates you and your career is over. That's the second arrow. And by day 3, the original comment is long forgotten by everyone except you, but you're still bleeding from the wound you keep reopening. A relationship ends. First arrow. painful, real. Then you tell yourself you'll never love again, that you're unlovable, that you wasted years, that everyone leaves eventually. Second arrow. Now you're not just grieving the loss. You're constructing an entire future of loneliness based on one ending. You get sick. First arrow. Your body is fighting something, and it feels terrible. Then you tell yourself this always happens to you, that your health is failing, that you're getting old, that things will only get worse. Second arrow. Now you're not just dealing with temporary illness. You're dealing with an existential crisis. The Buddha didn't teach that life should be free of first arrows. That's impossible. Life will shoot you. Repeatedly. In ways predictable and surprising. The teaching is about the second arrow. About noticing when you're reaching for it, when you're about to stab yourself with the story that makes everything worse. The man with the arrow could think, this hurts. I need help. That's enough. The hurt is real. The need for help is real. The rest is optional. Think about a difficulty you're facing right now. Separate it into first arrow and second arrow. What's the actual event or circumstance? And what's the story you're telling yourself about it? The story might feel true. It might even be true in some sense. But is it helping? Is it moving you toward healing or away from it? The second arrow is always a choice. Not always an easy choice. The habit of self-stabbing is strong. Years of practice have made it automatic. But it's still a choice. And recognizing it as a choice is the first step toward choosing differently. In a bustling port city, there was an innkeeper named Purna whose establishment was known throughout the region. Not because it was luxurious. The rooms were simple, the food plain, the beds firm. What made Purna's infamous was his policy toward guests. Anyone was welcome. Anyone. Merchants and monks. Soldiers and scholars. The wealthy and the desperate. Purna made no distinctions. He didn't ask about a person's past or their purpose. He didn't judge their appearance or their manners. When someone arrived at his door, he greeted them the same way, welcome. Rest. You are safe here. Some guests were pleasant. They paid on time, thanked him sincerely, left their rooms tidy. Others were difficult. They complained about the food, argued about the price, stayed past their welcome. A few were truly terrible. They caused trouble with other guests, left destruction in their wake, departed without paying. Purna welcomed them all the same. Not because he enjoyed the difficult ones, but because he understood something the other innkeepers didn't. The guests came and went. That was their nature. His job was to keep the inn open, to maintain the space, to offer rest to whoever needed it. The quality of the guests was not his concern. His concern was the quality of his welcome. One evening, a young man who'd stayed at the inn years before returned. He'd been one of the difficult ones, leaving without paying, causing trouble. Now he stood at the door, ashamed, needing a place to stay. I don't deserve your welcome, he said. Purna smiled. You're not my guest because you deserve it. You're my guest because you're here. The welcome was always available. You just weren't ready to receive it before. This is the teaching on meeting experience with open awareness. Your mind is the inn. Thoughts, emotions, sensations are the guests. Some are pleasant. Some are difficult. A few are truly terrible. The habit is to welcome the pleasant ones and try to throw out the difficult ones. To cling to the comfortable and fight the uncomfortable. But the guests keep coming. That's their nature. And fighting them doesn't make them leave faster. It just makes you in a battleground. The Buddha taught that all visitors are welcome. Not because you like them, but because they're already here. They've already arrived. Fighting their presence is like fighting the rain. It accomplishes nothing except making you wet and exhausted. Think about a difficult emotion you're carrying right now. Maybe it's anxiety. Maybe it's grief. Maybe it's anger. You've been trying to evict it, to push it out, to pretend it's not there. How's that working? Is it gone? Or is it just hiding in the corners, growing stronger from the attention you're giving it? Purna's approach is different. He opens the door. He says, "Welcome. Rest. You are safe here." Not because he wants the difficult guest to stay forever, but because he knows that welcoming reduces resistance, and resistance is what keeps guests around. When you stop fighting anxiety, something strange happens. It doesn't necessarily disappear, but it stops being a problem. It's just a feeling, like warmth or cold or the sensation of your breath. It comes, it stays for a while, it goes. The suffering wasn't the anxiety itself. The suffering was the fighting. The innkeeper's policy applies to all guests. The pleasant ones too. If you cling to them, if you try to make them stay past their time, you're still struggling. You're still trying to control what can't be controlled. The pleasant guests will leave too. That's their nature. Your job is not to keep them. Your job is to welcome them while they're here. Purnas thrived because travelers knew they'd be received without judgment. Your mind can thrive the same way. When thoughts arise, welcome them without judgment. When emotions surge, let them rest in your awareness without trying to change them. When sensations appear, notice them without preference. This is not passivity. This is profound activity. The activity of allowing. The activity of accepting what's already true. The activity of meeting life as it is, not as you wish it were. The young man who'd wronged Purna stayed at the inn for 3 days. He paid his bill this time. He left his room tidy. And when he departed, he carried with him something more valuable than a good night's sleep. He carried the memory of being welcomed when he didn't deserve it. And that memory changed how he welcomed others from that day forward. Your mind's guests are watching how you treat them. When you treat difficult emotions with compassion, you're learning compassion. When you treat pleasant emotions without grasping, you're learning freedom. Every guest is a teacher. Every visit is a lesson. There was once a fisherman named Nanda who supported his family by casting nets into the great river that flowed past his village. Nanda was skilled at his work. He knew where the fish gathered, when they fed, how to read the water's surface for signs of movement below. Most days, he returned with enough catch to feed his family and sell the rest at market. But Nanda had a secret. He was terrified of deep water. He'd learned to fish as a boy, staying close to shore where his feet could touch bottom. As he grew, he ventured slightly deeper, but never far. When he cast his net, he cast where he could still see the bottom, where the water was clear and familiar. The deep places, where the river ran dark and strong, he avoided completely. His father, before he died, had tried to encourage Nanda to go deeper. The big fish are in the deep water, he'd say. The ones that will feed the village for a week. But Nanda couldn't. The thought of water he couldn't see through, of depths he couldn't measure, paralyzed him. One season, the fish changed their patterns. The shallow waters where Nanda always fished grew empty. Day after day, he cast his net and pulled up nothing. His family grew hungry. His savings disappeared. Still, he couldn't bring himself to go where the water turned dark. Finally, his wife took him to the edge of the river at dusk. "Look," she said, pointing to the deep channel where the current ran swift and silent. "Can you see them?" Nanda looked. At first he saw nothing but dark water. Then, as his eyes adjusted, he noticed subtle movements beneath the surface. Fish. Many fish. Large fish. Exactly where his father had always said they'd be. "I can't," Nanda whispered. "I can't go there." His wife took his hand. "You don't have to go there. You just have to cast there. The net will go where you can't. The fish will come to you." This is the teaching on faith. Not blind belief in something you can't see, but willingness to cast your net where you can't yet see bottom. Nanda's fear was real. The deep water was dangerous if approached carelessly. But the fish were there, and his family was hungry. The choice wasn't between fear and no fear. The choice was between staying in the shallow water and going hungry, or casting into the deep and trusting the net to do its work. The Buddha taught that faith is not belief in propositions you can't prove. It's trust in the process. You plant seeds, trusting they'll grow, even though you can't see them underground. You practice meditation, trusting it will transform you, even though you can't measure the change day by day. You act with kindness, trusting it matters, even though the results may not appear in your lifetime. This faith is not blind. It's based on observation. You've seen seeds grow before. You've seen kindness change people before. You have evidence that the process works. The faith is in extending that evidence into areas you haven't yet tested personally. Nanda had seen other fishermen return from the deep with full nets. He had evidence. What he lacked was the willingness to apply that evidence to himself. You have evidence too. You've seen people change, grow, heal. You've experienced moments of peace, clarity, connection. You know these are possible. The question is whether you'll cast your net into the deep places of your own mind, the places you usually avoid, and trust that what you find there can feed you. The deep places are where the big fish live. The grief you haven't fully felt. The anger you've suppressed. The longing you've dismissed. These are not enemies. They're resources. They're the fish that can nourish you if you're willing to cast where you can't see bottom. Nanda cast his net that evening. His hands shook. His heart pounded. But he cast. And when he pulled the net back, it was heavy with fish. Not because the deep water was safe, but because he trusted the process enough to act. In a village at the edge of a great desert, water was the most precious resource. Every drop was counted, every source protected. Families stored water in large clay pots, keeping them in the coolest parts of their homes to prevent evaporation. A woman named Chanda had a pot that had been in her family for 3 generations. It was old, stained dark from decades of use, but still sound. Every morning, Chanda walked to the village well, filled her pot, and carried it home on her head, the water sloshing gently with each step. One morning, as she lifted the full pot from the well, her hand slipped. The pot fell, hit the stone edge of the well, and cracked. Not shattered, but cracked. A thin line ran from the rim halfway down the side. Chanda carried the pot home anyway, but by the time she arrived, half the water had leaked out through the crack. She set the pot down and stared at it. 3 generations. Now ruined. Her neighbor, seeing her distress, offered advice. You can still use it. Just fill it twice. Once for the leaking, once for what you keep. But Chanda couldn't accept this. The pot was broken. It wasn't what it had been. She pushed it into a corner and stopped using it. She bought a new pot, smooth and perfect, and used that instead. The new pot was fine. It carried water without leaking. But Chanda found herself missing the old one. She remembered how it had felt in her hands, how the dark stains told stories of her mother and grandmother. The new pot had no stories. One day, a traveler came through the village, begging for water. The well was far, and Chanda had already used her new pot for the day. She looked at the old pot in the corner, still holding the memory of its crack. She filled it at her indoor storage jar and handed it to the traveler. He drank deeply, then looked at the pot in his hands. "This is beautiful," he said. "Look at these stains. This pot has served for generations. You can feel the history in it." Chanda looked at the pot with new eyes. She'd been seeing only the crack. He was seeing everything else. This is the teaching on seeing clearly, without the filter of what should be. The pot was cracked. That was true. It was also beautiful, storied, useful. Both were true. But Chanda had been unable to see the beauty because she was so focused on the flaw. You do this with yourself. You have a crack somewhere. A mistake you made. A limitation you carry. A failure that defined you. And because of that crack, you push yourself into the corner, stop using yourself fully. You focus on what's broken and miss everything else that's still whole. The crack is real. It's also not the whole story. The pot still holds water. It still carries history. It's still beautiful in ways that have nothing to do with its imperfection. The traveler saw the pot clearly because he had no investment in it being perfect. He didn't know what it should be. He only saw what it was. And what it was enough. Look at yourself the way that traveler looked at the pot. Without the story of what you should be. Without the comparison to some imagined perfect version. Just see what's actually there. The cracks are visible. So is the beauty. So is the history. So is the usefulness. All of it is true. All of it is you. In a city of narrow streets and tall buildings, there lived a man named Daipa whose job was lighting the oil lamps at dusk. Each evening, as the sun sank below the rooftops, he would walk the city with his long pole, touching flame to wick, bringing light to the darkness. Daipa loved his work. He loved the moment when a lamp caught, the warm glow pushing back shadows. He loved watching people's faces soften as light replaced gloom. He loved knowing that his small action made the city safer, more beautiful, more alive. But Daipa had one frustration. The lamps went out. Every morning, he watched them flicker and die. Every evening, he had to light them again. The same lamps. The same streets. The same work, repeated endlessly. One evening, as he walked his route, a monk stopped him. "You look tired," the monk said. Daipa nodded. "The work never ends. I light the lamps, and by morning they're dark again. What's the point?" The monk smiled. "If the lamps stayed lit, what would you do?" Daipa thought. "I don't know. Something else, I suppose." And would that something else also need to be done repeatedly? Would you eat once and never be hungry again? Would you breathe once and never need air again? Daipa saw where this was going. "No," he admitted. "Everything needs repeating." "Then why do you treat your work as failure?" the monk asked. "The lamps go out because that's what lamps do. You light them because that's what you do. The going out is not a problem to be solved. It's just the nature of lamps and light. Your job is to meet that nature with your own nature, over and over, without resentment. This is the teaching on practice. The lamps go out. That's not failure. That's just how lamps work. The practice is lighting them again. You have practices in your life. Maybe you meditate. Some days it feels profound. Some days it feels like nothing. Some days you skip it entirely. And when you come back, the lamp is dark again. You have to light it again. Maybe you practice kindness. Some days it flows naturally. Some days every interaction feels forced. Some days you fail completely, snapping at someone who didn't deserve it. And the next day, you have to try again. Maybe you practice patience, honesty, generosity, presence. And the results are never permanent. You never reach a point where you're done, where the lamp stays lit forever. This can feel like failure. Like you're not making progress. Like something's wrong with you or your practice. But the monk's words to Daipa apply equally to you. The going out is not a problem. It's just the nature of lamps. Your job is to light them again. Not once, but continuously. Not as punishment, but as practice. The lamp lighter who resents the darkness will suffer. The one who accepts it as part of the cycle will find peace in the lighting itself, not in some imagined future where all lamps burn eternally. Your mind will wander. That's its nature. You bring it back. That's your practice. You will forget what matters. That's human. You remember. That's practice. You will fall into old patterns. That's habit. You choose differently. That's practice. The going out is not the problem. The problem is expecting it to stay lit. Daipa finished his route that night with a different feeling. The lamps still went out in the morning. He still lit them in the evening. But now he understood. The lighting was the point. The darkness would always return. And he would always be there, pole in hand, ready to bring light again. 10 lessons. 10 threads woven together into a cloth you can wrap around yourself when the cold winds blow. The gardener who learned to stop digging up his seeds. The cartographer who understood the map is not the territory. The woman who threw her pot at an echo. The merchant who tried to own the sunset. The weaver's daughter who finally finished something imperfect. The man with 2 arrows. The innkeeper who welcomed all guests. The fisherman who cast into deep water. The woman who saw her cracked pot with new eyes. The lamplighter who found peace in endless work. These are not just stories. They're maps of your own mind. The patterns you repeat, the suffering you create, the freedom that's available when you see clearly. The Buddha didn't teach these things as philosophy to be admired. He taught them as practices to be lived. The middle way between extremes. Right view that distinguishes map from territory. Understanding that your actions shape your future, every moment, every choice. Living each day as if it matters because it does. Building wisdom through small steps, consistently taken. Speaking truthfully and listening with an open heart. Meeting hatred with compassion that refuses to accept poison. Choosing companions who guide you past dangers you don't yet see. Giving without keeping score, without strings attached. And knowing, deep in your bones, that you have the capacity to awaken, regardless of what you've been told about your limitations. These teachings have guided millions of people across 25 centuries. They've worked for kings and beggars, scholars and illiterates, the healthy and the dying. They can work for you. Not because you're special, but because you're human. And these teachings address the fundamental nature of human consciousness, the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. The path is simple, even when it's not easy. Start where you are. Use what you have. Do what you can. The seeds are already planted. The water is already flowing. The lamps are waiting for your light. Rest now. Let these teachings settle into the soil of your mind. In the morning, when you rise, you'll be the same person you've always been. And also, perhaps, slightly different. A little more aware. A little more willing to see clearly. A little more ready to light the lamps again. This is Monk's Temple. May you be peaceful. May you be free. May you find what you're looking for, and may it be enough. Until next time.